Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to Strikes My Fancy. I have a very special guest with me today, and I bet you guys can't guess who it is.
Who is it, Kayla? Who is it?
It's Rachel!
Yay!
If you've been here from the Good Luck Sleeping days, then you will know exactly who Rachel was. If you haven't, Rachel was my co-host on Good Luck Sleeping, the first podcast that we ever did, and the very thing that struck my fancy.
You got to take that line this time. I was disappointed.
I know, sorry. We had to re-record because I messed up the audio on something. So, yeah, she brought that up earlier. But
Sorry. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
yes, we struggled with Good Luck Sleeping and, deciding to finally retire that. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But I wanted to do a paranormal segment on this podcast because I still love the paranormal. And I was like, it's just not right without Rachel. So I asked her and she was willing to come back.
Anytime you want me, I will be glad to be here.
Yes. So she actually just mentioned that she might be starting a podcast of her own soon.
Yes.
Do you want to tell me about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's still, Kayla brought up the fact that it's hard to pick a podcast and stick with like a set topic. So I think what she's doing here is great. I'm super proud of her because she can kind of delve into different areas and it doesn't get bland for a podcaster.
Yes.
And so I'm still kind of trying to narrow it down and kind of decide what direction I want to go with and if I want to co-host or, whatever. But something may be happening. And if you follow the Good Luck Sleeping page, I will update you if that happens.
Yes. So, and I guess now would be a good time to talk about why Good Luck Sleeping ended real quick. I mean, it wasn't anything super dramatic. It was just, when you're empathic, like Rachel and I are, and you're, researching negative things like death and demons and all of that for hours, and then you're talking about it for hours, and then you're recording it for hours, it just really starts to weigh on you. Mm-hmm. And it got to the point where, we were both like super depressed.
Yep.
And I think you even said you felt like something was maybe attached to you or in your home.
I didn't feel like myself. I just felt very weighed down and, that it may have been, and it may have just been just topics that we were covering and how heavy we were going. And, we really tried to give you guys the best of the best. And in the paranormal world, that's the scariest of the scariest and the darkest of the dark. So it was a lot. Yeah.
And it got to the point where I think we were trying to outdo each other with the scariest stories and stuff.
To creep each other out.
Yeah. That's what you want to do. But then when it's all you're doing every single week, it just really weighed down on us and took a toll. So we were really, really sad to have to say goodbye to it. And that's why, we're starting our own podcasts on different topics because we just couldn't keep doing that every single time. But what we can do is have a series on this show where we occasionally talk about paranormal things. So
exactly. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be back at a mic and with Kayla and
yeah, it's the best of both worlds for us. I hope it's good for you guys too. So
is that like a Hannah Montana song? Or?
It's the best of both worlds. I don't remember how it goes, but
I'm too old for that. So.
To be fair, I was a little too old for Hannah Montana too. But anyway, real quick before we get into the episode, let me remind you where you can find me. You can find me on Facebook, the Strikes My Fancy podcast group. You can find me on Instagram, Strikes My Fancy Pod. You can find me on Twitter, Strikes Me Fancy. You can listen to my show on my website, strikesmyfancy.podbean.com. Or you can listen to me on Apple, Spotify, even YouTube. All you got to do is search for Strikes My Fancy. And if you have an idea for the show or you want to even be on the show, send me an email to strikesmyfancypodcast@gmail.com and we will talk. And if you don't follow the Good Luck Sleeping podcast group on Facebook, you should do that because that is where Rachel will release her stuff and I sometimes post there too.
It's a fun page.
It is a fun page. It's like a little family.
Yes. Okay. My favorite thing about where people can follow you is Strikes Me Fancy.
Thank you to the person who took Strikes My Fancy on Twitter. It's been great.
It reminds me of a jolly little Irish grandpa.
Doesn't it?
Strikes Me Fancy.
Well, that's why I thought it was so funny that on my first release, I was charting in Ireland on like 5 different charts.
So like, Strikes Me Fancy. Yeah. That must be for us.
Exactly. It was great.
That's so cute.
Well, today I figured what better way to launch our paranormal series than to tell ghost stories.
I think it's a perfect way.
It is perfect. That was always one of our favorite things to do. Besides the listener stories, those were great. Which if anybody has a paranormal story and you want to send it in, send it to my email, strikesmyfancypodcast@gmail.com, and maybe we'll tell your story. Why not?
All right.
All right, so I'm going to start. We got quite a few stories here today. Hopefully, y'all find them interesting. We were on a struggle bus trying to find really good, true ghost stories.
Real life is scariest.
This year, that's what we talked about. This year has been a nightmare. I think the ghosts were like, you know what? We're going to back off because this has been bad enough. We'll see you on the other side of hell.
We'll see you in 2021, maybe. God, hopefully. You know what I think about?
I just want normal ghosts back.
Yeah. I think about what if 2021 is worse?
Oh, don't do that.
I mean, do you ever think
don't
about
go
that?
there.
All right, sorry. Back to paranormal.
Well, you mentioned earlier you called it the grand finale.
What
if it is the grand finale?
Yeah, 2020's finale. I'm not tuning in. I don't want to watch it. I'm out.
Yeah, New Year's, we're just like, everybody go to bed and let's pray it's better in the morning.
But what I love about 2020 is like there's so much shit that happens that when I hear about something, any other year I'd be like, oh my God, that's terrifying. And now I'm just like, oh.
Anybody have that on their bingo card?
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's hoping 2021 is going to be a lot better, but let's make it better with some ghost stories.
I'm ready.
The first one I have is by girl Danny DeVito. And it's called I Have Never Experienced Genuine Terror Until Last Night. So this person wants to start off by saying they've never experienced anything visual like this before. And if they could receive a possible explanation, they would love to hear it. She says, my girlfriend and I are in the process of moving into our basement suite. So the basement suite that we're moving into has been completely gutted and most of the appliances and flooring replaced except for the bathroom. It's now a city legal suite with its own water heater since there had been a massive police investigation done a few months prior. We weren't told much about what happened other than drug-related incidents. I went into the bathroom to do some cleaning yesterday evening and noticed what looks like blood at the bottom of the radiator. And there's a photo here. I may post it in the group for anybody who wants to see it. It seemed creepy, and obviously I didn't want to touch it because gross. Anyways, a few hours pass and my girlfriend goes to bed in the bedroom. I fall asleep on the couch watching TV. I woke up around 4 a.m. to our cat knocking a plant off the windowsill and messing with the blinds. Cats, man, they're such assholes. The lights were off. But this person has like a big black light aquarium, she said, that lit up most of the living room. My girlfriend came out of the room to ask what was going on, and I was all pissed off, half asleep, cleaning dirt off the countertops. She told me just leave it for tomorrow and come on to bed, and then walked away. I stayed up and continued cleaning for maybe 20 more minutes since there was dirt everywhere. And this is what freaking terrifies me even thinking about it now. I was in the kitchen wiping down the counters. It was pretty dim, but I could still see it was around 4:30 a.m. I turned around towards the garbage can and my girlfriend, in quotes, is standing in the dark doorway just staring at me. I couldn't see her face clearly, but it was a 6 foot tall, thin figure. Now, what person would go, oh, that's my girlfriend? I know one girl who's 6 foot tall. That's not normal for women to be 6 foot tall. But no, seeing the 6 foot thin figure, it's the exact build as this person's girlfriend. I said, sorry if I'm keeping you up. I'm almost done. She just stood there facing me. I figured she was just pissed off since we had been arguing off and on this whole week. I finished what I was doing and walked past her and asked if she was coming to bed, but she didn't move. I walked straight into the bedroom, closed the door, and there my girlfriend was sleeping in her bed.
A doppelganger?
That's what I was thinking. I woke her up by closing the door, and I guess the look on my face scared her enough to spring up in bed. She immediately was like, what's going on? This person immediately starts gagging, swearing, and pretty much lost it for a minute or two. Apparently, it scared them so bad they almost puked all over themselves. Oh. I told her I just saw her in the kitchen. She said, well, yeah, I came out earlier and asked what happened. And she said, no, I just walked past you walking into the bedroom. She pretty much just went silent, peeked out of the door, and nothing was there. We both went to sleep a while later. I don't get strange feelings here at all, which is the weird part, but my gosh, I have no idea what that was last night, and it scared me so bad I almost threw up when I realized my girlfriend had been sleeping for the past half hour. I have no idea what to make of that.
Oh, I hate that.
Was the 6 foot tall thing not a clue?
Well, how tall was the girlfriend? I need a physical description.
Maybe she was 6 feet tall.
We know girl Danny DeVito was probably smaller.
If it's girl Danny DeVito, she's like 3 foot max.
He's so cute.
No, he's not.
Like cute, like adorable cute. I
don't think so. He scares me. I don't know what it is about him. He's so unsettling.
Well, my next ghost story is about Danny DeVito. No. Yeah, that was creepy. Mm-hmm. All right.
Our official suggestion would be doppelganger.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so this, where did I get this? I think I got this off the website called like Your Ghost Stories or Your Real Ghost Stories. I scoured the internet and this is what I could come up with. This is my one of 3 that I'm mediocrely proud of, but maybe they'll be more exciting to you guys.
I feel like I'm kind of desensitized at this point.
You know what? Maybe that's it. Maybe they're really good stories and we're just like
experienced worse.
Been there, done that, you know. Okay, so this is by Wicked Scissors 17.
Oh,
okay. So she goes, well, maybe she. Oh no, yeah, she. My husband shot. Well, okay, I don't want to assume. Let me just start over here. I'm going to be as politically correct as possible. This could be a man or woman, young adult, older, whatever. Okay. My husband Sean and I, as newlyweds, relocated to a little house in Weber City, Virginia. In January 2014. That is an end statement. We were so excited to move into this little house as we were leasing to own. My mom assisted us in the move, and we couldn't have been prouder of being homeowners. It was such a beautiful little starter home, and it was located practically at the base of a mountain in the woods, located on the Trail of Tears. This is starting out well.
Indian burial ground. Sounds great.
Within the first week, the activity began. I was training as a CNA at a local nursing home in the area, and I got up early one morning as I had been for my classes. It was around 5:30 in the morning, and I was in the bathroom blow-drying my hair with the door open. It was a small bathroom, so I left the door open so I wouldn't get hot. As I held my head upside down and tousled my hair and dry it around, I caught a glimpse of someone in an old-timey pioneer woman dress float directly next to me into my bedroom. Confused and not understanding what I had just seen, I stopped what I was doing and walked into the bedroom where my husband was sleeping. I couldn't explain what had just happened, and I was at a total loss for words. I mentioned what had happened to my friends and family, and most just laughed. When I told my mother, she mentioned to me that the house next door had been on a paranormal television show, and supposedly it was known for being extremely haunted. I laughed it off and didn't think much of it. I was wrong to ever act so nonchalant. We found out we were pregnant with our firstborn, Harper, shortly after moving into the home. Things were great for a while. We had a baby on the way, and I had decided to take time off and stay home while pregnant. One night, I remember my husband had went to sleep before me, and I was sitting in the living room watching TV, and we had 3 dogs at the time, and I whistled for them to come out of the bedroom and come into the living room with me. I whistled, and all of a sudden I heard a whistle right back. I got up and walked to the bedroom to see if my husband was awake, and he was fast asleep. I got that eerie feeling like someone was watching me and stayed up most of the night. There are many moments in the home where you would hear people speaking in the house very low, and I can explain it only like when you're at a diner and how it can be during an early morning rush, multiple conversations just going nonstop. We could hear it all throughout the night while we laid in bed and attempted to sleep. My husband was a bit of a skeptic prior to moving into the house. You could also lay in our bed at night and see shadows speed from the dining room to the living room. And it got to be quite disturbing at night when we both laid down and we both thought our eyes were playing tricks at us. Oh, because of the shadows. Okay.
Yeah.
The activity was fairly frequent, but nothing too extreme at first. Now, I know seeing someone walk by me is pretty extreme, but not when you lived in this house. Eventually, we got pregnant again with Charlotte and became a family of 4. My husband's cousin, Thomas, needed a place to stay and moved in with us. We joked with him about the house next door being haunted and told him about the weird things that occurred in our home. My husband, being the practical joker he is, thought it would be funny to buy a satanic Bible and read and poke fun of the things inside of it.
No, never.
He likes to taunt people or things on occasion. One night, he decided he'd go next door and summon whatever was in the house to come to him. This is like what you don't do in every horror movie ever. No one was living in the home at the time, and usually the residents didn't last longer than a few months. As soon as he got done summoning whatever it was in the house, he became violently ill and ran back home getting sick in the yard. That's when things went downhill.
I mean, there's your sign.
There's your sign. There were times when you could go outside and see the light randomly come on upstairs in the house next door and no one was there. We know this because my husband and his friend went over to find out if someone was there, and they knocked for a while and no one came to the door. They came back to the porch and the lights went off. It was so strange. We went back in our house and came back out to smoke about 30 minutes later, and the light came back on. We would see shadows all the time outside as well, and so much just kept going on. After the satanic Bible incident, my husband, myself, and the girls were asleep in bed. I remember, in the bed, so they were all together. I remember waking up feeling someone's hand touching me inappropriately, and I thought it was my husband. I remember laughing and saying stop, and when I opened my eyes, I was looking at him with both of the girls laying on and against him. I immediately froze in fear and went catatonic. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak, and I couldn't do anything. I remember feeling the tears running down my face, and with everything in me, I knew someone was behind me. It's like I was screaming inside my head for my husband to wake up, but nothing came out. Finally, it's like whatever was touching me released, and I shot up crying. I was so shook by that moment, and I had never had anything happen like that to me before. I felt so violated, and my husband, being my husband, just laughed and assumed I had been dreaming and poked fun at me about it. Okay.
Demon sex, best dream around.
Sounds great. Ugh, gross. I labeled the incident the big night because it was just that. One night... Oh, I'm so sorry.
Wait, really?
Nope. I labeled the next incident as the big night because it was just that. That was a big faux pas.
I mean, sex with a demon, that's a big night.
Okay, she hated it though. So, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Okay, one night my husband, his cousin, and myself were hanging out. The girls were already in bed. We were up late and it was so cold outside. I remember having to wear a jacket when I went outside and smoked, and I could see my breath that it was so cold. I came back in from the porch after smoking and looked out my dining room window toward the haunted house. In the yard, they had a concrete table and bench, and to my surprise, in the freezing cold, there were 3 people sitting at the table, and a lantern was lit over their head. A tall man, and his face was so distorted that I couldn't make it out, and he was wearing overalls and kept shaking oddly. A dark blonde woman and an old woman in a long black robe or dress. Now, I wouldn't have thought it was too strange, but the lantern was just hanging in midair from nothing, and it was freezing cold outside, and they were just sitting there. I shouted for my husband and his cousin, another skeptic, and they were both shocked and in disbelief. We couldn't believe our eyes. I ran to the back porch and looked at the table, and no one was there. I thought I was going crazy. I ran back in, and there they were again. I went out to my front porch, and I could still see them. Again to the back porch, and they were gone. It's like the only place I could see them was from my dining room front porch. My husband's cousin Thomas was in shock and refused to look anymore and went back into the living room scared of what he was seeing. I remember asking him, "Are you seeing this? Are we seeing the same thing?" He replied, "Yes, but I don't want to admit it to myself." I waved at the people sitting there and they waved back. I did this frequently throughout the night until finally around 4 a.m. the blonde female flipped me off. And around 6 they disappeared, and it was the craziest thing I had ever seen, and I've never seen anything like it since. One day the woman that owned the house next door came over and asked my husband if he could help change the locks on her house because new people were moving in. He went over and helped, and she proceeded to tell him her brother had lived in the house and practiced the occult and was into some pretty heavy stuff. He had Parkinson's and always wore overalls. He immediately thought of the man that we'd seen sitting that night at the table. She then told him her brother shot himself upstairs in the middle of a pentagram. My husband was very disturbed by this. We both swear it was her brother that we saw that night at the table outside. So I assume that he wasn't alive at the time that they saw him. Does that sound like that's what it means?
Yeah.
We lived there for a few years, and it was almost like the place was draining our relationship, turning us against one another and causing severe damage to our marriage. We decided to part ways, and I relocated to North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, to be closer to my mother, who had moved down a year after I moved into the house. Leaving that house was the best decision we ever made. My husband and I reconciled and are happier than ever here in South Carolina with both of our girls. One evening, we were watching TV, and the show pops up on Hulu called Paranormal State. An episode labeled Devil's Nest comes on. That's episode 20, season 3. We began watching, and we were shocked by what we were seeing as they drove up our old road, our old hill, and you could see our house as they pulled into the driveway of the house next door and began their investigation of the Devil's Nest.
Oh my gosh.
My husband was in shock and stated that this just put everything together that he'd experienced because he just wrote it off as he was going crazy. One scene in the show, the resident states she was sexually assaulted by something there, and it made things just come together for me.
That's what happened to her.
Mm-hmm. My husband was at that point in shock and dismay by what had actually happened to me. We both feel for whoever lives in either house because we don't feel like it's the houses. We feel like it's the land, and it has a permanent stain that will never be lifted. I'm so glad we moved away from there, but we will always remember the horrible, shocking events that happened while we lived there.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I loved Paranormal State. Did you ever watch that show?
Yes, it was.
That was with that guy that like he took people's money and then was fraudulent about it, said he had cancer and he didn't actually
actually have cancer? Because oh no.
He was money laundering.
That makes me so sad because apparently I'm a really bad judge of character, because when I saw I loved him too.
Yeah. His name was Ryan, I think.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe he was just a good person having a really dark time.
No, because he kept trying to scam people on and off for the rest of his life. So.
Well, never mind.
But yeah, it was a great show.
It was a good show.
Okay, so it's by Crafty Bat. It says, I grabbed my cats and ran. And it actually has a lot of awards on Reddit. People like this. Okay. So it starts off by saying, this is not fake. This really happened. Okay. Last winter, I was home alone this particular night, which is unusual. I live in a duplex. My upstairs neighbors went snow machining up near Fairbanks, Alaska. I live in Anchorage. It was between 3 to 4 a.m. on a Saturday night. My daughter was at a sleepover. My man was at work, and it was just me and my 2 cats. The dream.
Living the dream.
We were watching TV. I had smoked some weed earlier in the night. We've lived here for 3.5 years now and have regular hauntings as my landlord's husband actually died of a sudden burst aneurysm. He's mischievous and he'll turn the TV off if I'm watching something he doesn't like, reality shows mostly. He doesn't want to watch those Kardashians. I have seen him move things, but I don't see him a lot, like out of the corner of my eye mostly. Okay. This experience, however, was not him. It was something much, much darker. I had the TV on. I had 2 battery-powered lights on, my bathroom light in the master bedroom, and the hall light on. Now, I'm a homeowner. That's incredibly irresponsible to have that many lights on, and that bugs me terribly. So in case you're wondering, her cats' names are Scraps and Migo. She says the bathroom door is sliding mirrors, which is just like mine. It was open, and so was the door to her room. So she's drifting off to sleep. She's got 1 cat in front of her, 1 cat behind her. I don't know why she feels the need to describe what her cats look like, but she did.
Detailed. She's detailed.
Very detailed.
Are they cute?
They are. Scraps is tall and lean. He's gray striped, and Migo is a medium-haired tabby.
Cute.
He was laying in front of her, and all at once, Migo and Scraps jump up immediately in a defensive position. All the lights go out, including the 2 battery-powered lights. She laid there in fear as her cats were spitting and growling at something extremely low. There was a figure by the bathroom door. Scraps came and got in front of me as if to protect me as we all watched this tall black figure emerge from the bathroom and closet. After a second, it just dissolved into the darkness as all the lights came back on. She grabbed her cats, ran her ass out of the house. She said, I didn't even put on shoes. My keys were just next to me and we dipped. I haven't had any other experiences with that particular entity. Side note, I've always been extremely energy conscious. I'm not a medium or anything like that, but I have had a lot of paranormal experiences, and she just wanted to share those.
All right. Well, yeah, I would have dipped too.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't have?
So everybody was saying that sounded like a shadow man, which I concur.
Yes.
So now you've got a cryptid story.
I have a cryptid story.
This is a throwback.
Yes, by Chlorine Bleach. This is called Humanoid Being Running Past Me at Night. Okay. They go, hey, I just found this sub as I have become quite a believer since this encounter. I've been moderately open to the idea of other beings before this, be the otherworldly, extraterrestrial, or extra-dimensional in nature before this occurred. But more in the, hey, wouldn't it be cool sort of way. But I am now actively looking to see if someone had ever seen something similar.
Words.
So here goes, as detailed as possible. I was in my early 20s when this happened, still living with my parents. Back when I used to drive around at night, I listened to music, just killing time. But really, I did the same thing. I grew up rurally and didn't have a large circle of friends, so I often had nothing better to do to get us out of the house, and I just enjoyed cruising around. This night was different as I had an argument with my father and had to leave the house in order to clear my head. I decided on the way to grab a small flask of vodka at the gas station and just drive out to the village and look at the stars. Sounds like a good night. The area I ended up parking was surrounded by cornfields and small patches of wood. Very agricultural, and I could still make out the lights of the closest village in the distance and hear the hum of the freeway relatively close. The last area you'd expect to run into something unusual, not very remote, no untouched wilderness. I drove off the main road, parked on dirt road leading into a patch of forest. There was a large cornfield on my right and a patch of grassland on my left. Just a meadow, no fencing or animals though. Okay, I'm confused as to where she was, but it's rural. Okay, she's in a lot of
the boonies.
Planty areas.
Yeah. Planty areas.
It was pitch black, so I left the car lights on to take a stroll, vodka flask in hand. I immediately felt nervous getting out of the car. There was this kind of eerie vibe to the area, despite how mundane it looked. I was hyper aware of the sounds around me, the hum of the freeway and the crickets chirping. All I wanted to do in that instance was to keep driving and just go home. But back then, I figured it was just me being a coward, and there was no way that I would stay and stargaze in this mood. I figured I'd owe it to myself to just go for a short jog towards that patch of wood, just to prove to myself that I wasn't big pussy.
I mean, sometimes you just need to be a pussy to get out of there.
Yeah, I mean, don't be a hero, right?
Yeah.
Okay. It hasn't occurred to me back then that my subconscious might have picked up on my being watched, because when I started to run towards the woods just at the edge of what my car lights illuminated, something broke out of the undergrowth and sprinted towards me. I was startled like this before when it turned out it was a deer, but this time it wasn't. I nearly fell over as a seemingly naked man broke out of this forest and ran towards me. I stared in disbelief as I made out its features. It was humanoid, light skin colored from what I could tell, and way larger than I am, a good 2 heads taller, and I'm 5'11", and it seemed very muscular. I did not make out any hair or genitalia, so no penises.
No monster balls.
I don't recall if I jumped or tripped, but I wavered for a moment and had to catch my footing as I was so startled I almost fell over. Now, I think I remember it having a larger animal-like eyes, but I remember distinctly that it had no defined lips and a very short nose, mostly consisting of elongated slits. It circled
Voldemort.
Yeah, right? Actually, it kind of sounds like
it's Voldemort coming back from the dead.
Oh, it circled around me, and later on I figured it might not have wanted to directly walk into the lights of my car. It made a noise like at me, kind of like a startled dog. Kind of huff, but it felt very hostile. So more like,
that's like Scooby.
Then it ran off, crossing the road into the cornfield with very large, seemingly confident struts. It was like saucing across the road. It was very fast and did not seem to be bothered by breaking straight through a cornfield. I'm not sure, but I also think it had exaggerated leg muscles on the back of its legs, despite being generally slender, but of wiry strength, if that makes sense. Clorox bleach or chlorine bleach, it doesn't really, but okay.
So they basically just want you to think like, okay, so this thing looks like it couldn't actually take you, but it could take you.
It's got massive trunk legs.
Yeah.
Okay. It took me a bit to gain my composure, and my hands were shaking all the way home. I also drove over a curb with too high speed and was getting a flat tire, which I noticed when I got home.
I've done that, man. That's the worst.
So he or she has some notes. 1, this was approximately 8 years ago. I'm bad with time, and happened in Germany. 2, I had alcohol that I intended to drink, but I did not get to it, so I was sober. I also don't do drugs, nor would I know of any drugs that could cause this kind of specific hallucination, but leave users sober otherwise. Very true. 3, since then I had my doubts that it might have just been a very tall person, but the just the logistics of something like this living undiscovered, so close to civilization, and nobody ever sees it, seems very unrealistic to me. But then again, very tall, deformed, naked people that can run extremely fast, hiding near small German villages in Rhineland flats seem unlikely too. 4, I understand that its appearance might seem cliche, but maybe that is because I only saw it for a short period of time, and maybe it's also cliche for a reason. 5, okay, edit, full disclosure. I had another seemingly paranormal encounter when I was a kid, but that was of a completely different nature, and well, I was like 8. So I really like this writer. Very funny. So there's a remote possibility that I have momentary lapses of sanity every other decade, although I'm not aware of any psychiatric condition like this. So, anyone ever seen something like this? Or heard? Is there an urban legend that I have missed? I'd be interested to hear from you if this is the case. So hop on Reddit.
That reminds
hit her up.
me. Do you remember that video that we saw, the guy that was in his house and he was like calling 911 saying there was something coming up to his screen door and it was like this humanoid thing. Everybody was saying like a rake or something like that, I think is what it was called. That's what that reminds me of. Okay. This one is called My Daughter's Quote Unquote Friend, and it's by Juno1216. So my daughter just turned 4 years old. About a year ago, she started talking about her friend Ada all of the time. I thought she was just playing and using her imagination. She never actually would play with the friend in front of anyone, though. She would just tell me about her friend who she apparently met at her Nana's, which is her great-grandmother on her father's side. I never really thought too much of it at first. One day we were pulling into a Walmart parking lot and my daughter pointed towards an apartment building next door and said, "That's where my friend Ada died." And I was like, what the fuck? I tried to ask her what she meant by that, but she just repeated it and then changed the subject as a toddler often does. A few months later, we were pulling into the same parking lot and she says it again. That's when I knew it wasn't normal toddler imagination. It was just too strange. I tried to ask her more about Ada when she would bring her up, but I couldn't get any real answers. She really only brought Ada up occasionally, so it wasn't something she would talk about all day, every day. It all came to a head one day when my daughter's stepmom texted me asking if I knew about my daughter's friend Ada. I said I did, and she told me that she has been talking about this Ada Carter and her sister Sarah, and she decided to Google their names. She found a record of the sisters with pictures and sent them to me. The girl who was Sarah looked exactly like my daughter, only a young adult instead. They had the same big black eyes and black hair, the same features. They looked related for sure. The girl Ada looked exactly like my oldest daughter also. It was incredibly weird. But the icing on the cake was that there was also a picture of their mother, whose name was Betsy Larson, the name of my kid's father's grandparents. The last name of my kid's Nana, whose house my daughter had apparently met Ada at. And the thing that gave us no doubt about it was that the same picture of the mother that we found online was hanging in their Nana's house.
Oh my
The grandfather who would have known these relatives had unfortunately passed away years ago, so they couldn't even ask him about it. I asked their Nana, and she doesn't know who they are. Ada, Sarah, and Betsy are all deceased. Ada passed away in the 1970s. I am completely convinced that my daughter has communicated with Ada's spirit and almost believe that she may have been Sarah in a past life. Ooh, I'm getting chills. Yeah. The one thing that is strange is that my daughter says Ada is a little girl just like her, but Ada died as an adult. There's no doubt that the people we found online are related to my kids and their father. They have distinct features that make it even more convincing. My daughter has said many things that have made me believe she can see things beyond this realm, but this one is by far the most unexplainable. I am convinced my daughter's ancestors have communicated with her. And there's an update. She said, I tried asking my daughter more questions, and I wasn't getting any answers, so my 8-year-old took it upon herself to ask her more questions while they were playing. My daughter said she plays with Ada through her memories, and that Ada is a real, regular person. Another thing, I showed her the pictures again, and she wasn't sure who Ada or Sarah were right away. She said, who are they again? She recognized them, but she didn't know who they were right away. Once I told her, she knew, though. I believe it may be because she hasn't seen Ada in a while, and Ada shows herself as a child to my daughter, and the pictures are of adults. Although the first time I showed her the pictures months ago, she knew who Ada was right away, and when shown Sarah, she said, that's me.
Huh. Oh.
Isn't that crazy?
So a little bit of reincarnation happening. Okay. Creepy, man.
Another throwback there.
Okay. Okay, these are good.
I think they're good too.
Yeah.
We were just doubting
I think we were just,
It's just been so long.
Getting in our own heads.
Yeah.
You know?
Gosh.
All right. So the last story I have is called The Time I Had an Encounter with a Wendigo. Or a Wendigo.
Wendigo.
Wendigo. Put the emphasis on the wrong syllable there. Okay, so this is also from Reddit. I did not find the username because I copied and pasted, and apparently that didn't copy and paste. So shout out to you on Reddit. Okay. To preface, I'm not the person who throws ish like this around lightly. I'm mostly posting this out of curiosity of other people's experiences with wendigos/cryptids. I've, 23 female, always had creepy paranormal experiences, but when I'm with my sister, 25 female, the dial goes up to a 10 on the creep factor. So anyway, a couple of months back, my sister and I had to drive up to Colorado on a family emergency. Specifically, we were driving to Dillon, Colorado. The drive up was pretty normal and nothing weird started to happen until we got right outside of Leadville. That's when things took a turn for the decidedly strange. You can believe me or not about what I'm about to say, but even though it was late at night, I know I'm not crazy and my sister saw all of this too. So we're driving and it's pitch black outside. There's very little street lamps, so the only things we can see illuminated are by the headlights. My sister is driving and I'm in the passenger seat. At this point in the drive, we only had a few more hours until Dillon, and we were determined to stick it out no matter what, despite the fact that we'd been driving for nearly 12 hours at this point. Looking back, I kind of wished we'd had some common sense and found a hotel and never driven on this road at this time of night. It's about 9, and my sister has the radio going. I'm staring out the window trying to stay awake when all of a sudden my sister slammed on her brakes. Now, for context, my sister is a cabbie and there's not a whole hell of a lot that would make her slam on her brakes like that. So when she did, I was automatically on full alert wondering what the hell just happened. Before I could even ask her what made her slam on her brakes, she's telling me to look up. No shit, standing in the middle of the opposite lane on this deserted 2-lane road is a big as fuck coyote. Bigger than any coyote I've ever seen. Not that unusual, except that it was just staring at us. Not the car, at us. It was making full-on, dead-ass eye contact with us. Obviously creeped out, I told my sister to just floor it because I didn't like the eerie, almost intelligent way that the coyote had been looking at us. As we passed it, I forced my eyes forward so I wouldn't have to look at it. We kept driving, a little shook up, but laughing it off. After all, we're both from the Southwest, and there's no way a lone coyote is going to spook us that bad. A little bit further down the road, I'm calmed down again and back to staring out of the window. Maybe 5 more minutes pass before I hear my sister ask me, "Did you just see that?" Thinking she's messing with me, I'm like, "No, see what?" And as I turn to look, I see that she's spooked. Believe me, it takes a lot to spook her, so I was immediately concerned. She sees that I have no clue what she's talking about, so she says, "Dude, there was a hand that just came up out of the back seat and touched the dash." Now I'm even more creeped out. I try to make a joke out of it, saying how it's late and the whole thing with the coyote, but she's insistent on what she saw, so I ask her to replicate it. She gestures to the back seat and says, "I saw a hand come up and touch the dash like this." At this, she makes a fist and taps it against the dash. I shake my head and tell her I didn't see anything. That we should just keep going because I'm sure as hell not turning back now. But oh man, that was not the end of it. Not even 10 minutes later, we're still driving on this dark, windy mountain road, and I'm looking forward, fully awake now, and doing my best to take my mind off of the situation, when I happen to glance out of the driver's side to the front windshield. Again, on the opposite side of the road, I see a woman standing on the edge of the road. She's all alone and just standing there in a torn white dress and barefoot. Obviously thinking that this girl needs help, I open my mouth to ask my sister to stop, but before I can get the words out, we're already around the next bend, and as I look in the rearview mirror to check if she's still there, the girl is just gone, vanished,
Ooh.
Poof. I'm really freaking out at this point, and I just want to get to our hotel. Thankfully, a few minutes later, we were in Leadville itself, which, to be honest, at around 10-11 at night is just as creepy, if not more. I dreaded when we got to the outskirts of town, and I had to go back onto that lonely mountain highway. Mind you, we're still alone, and we haven't seen another car in over an hour, which makes this next part even creepier somehow. So a few miles on the other side of Leadville, I feel my sister grab my arm. Again, she asks that dreaded question, "Did you see that?" I say no, obviously. I'm keeping my eyes on my side of the vehicle, and I have no idea what she's talking about. So she says, and honestly, after what happened, after this, I completely believe her, that she saw breath on the outside of the windshield. Not on the inside, the outside. Like someone outside the vehicle had breathed on the glass. I'm really glad that I didn't see that because I would have just turned the car around. But at this point, we're both like, fuck it, we're almost there and we can hold out until Dylan. So, like dumb idiots in a horror movie, we kept driving. I don't know distance-wise how far away this is from Leadville, but we came up to a weird parking lot area at a bend in the road. I think it was a hotel or something. I'm not too familiar with the area, but it was weird seeing a parking lot and actual lights in the middle of BFE, Colorado. Is that BFE? Bumfuck? Everywhere? Colorado? BFE, Colorado.
Sure.
Okay. I'm saying this to tell you that as we approached this place, we saw oncoming headlights. Now, mind you, this was the first car we'd seen in a long time, but if there was this weird little building out there and Leadville only a few miles behind us, it wouldn't be that strange to see a car heading in the other direction. Except that the car didn't go in the direction we thought. No, we both saw the lights of this car and we both saw it drive parallel to the road and disappear. Now we're for sure thinking we're hallucinating and making jokes about aliens, saying how that was a flying saucer and we could tally that to the list of the weird things we'd seen. With not much options left but to keep on driving, but man, that's when things started getting really bad. It went from bad to worse. It just keeps getting worse. The longer we're driving, the more freaked out my sister looks. At one point, she tells me that the lane lines are disappearing, as in she can't tell the difference between one lane line and the other, and on a 2-lane mountain road. You can blame this on fatigue, but my sister drives a cab for a living. She wakes up at 2 a.m. to go to work most days. There's no freaking way, no matter how tired she is, that she's hallucinating the lane lines not being there.
Yeah, I mean, she's used to this. This is her job.
Yeah. I can see them just fine, but she swears up and down that she can't see the lanes on either side. I think it was only her experience as a cab driver that saved our asses. Now, this next part is going to sound insane, and I don't blame anyone for not believing me. I wouldn't believe me if I didn't experience it myself. So we got the lane lines disappearing, cars disappearing off the road, weird shit breathing on the windshield, and the icing on the cake is that...
The ghost is just like, you've got a spot there. Let me clean it.
Like writing its name in it with its finger like kids do on a bus.
Yeah.
Okay, the icing on the cake is that it now feels like the car is doing a free fall down the mountain.
Oh, cool.
No, not like we're out of control, but like there's an invisible force pushing us from behind and trying to make us go down the mountain faster. My sister
Get off my mountain.
This is my mountain. My sister is riding the brakes like hell, and I'm trying to figure out why it feels like we're on a free fall when we're on less than 20-degree slope. It makes no sense. And as I'm thinking this, I hear my sister ask me, "Hey, is it windy outside?" And I shake my head. I check my phone and I'm like, no, there's no wind outside at all. In the car, you would have been able to hear the wind and feel it pushing on all sides, not just the back. Wind makes a very distinctive noise. And so I know that it wasn't any weird wind that night. I was going to make the noise, but I didn't. That doesn't explain, however, why, when my sister told me to look at the trees on either side of the road, that they were swaying, bending back and forth like there's a storm outside. But there's no storm, no wind, no clouds, nothing. Nothing that could explain why these trees are moving like this. I'm really freaked out, and now I start to pray. I'm religious to a point, and I'm not ashamed to say that I pray when I get scared like this, and I was terrified. Because underneath all of the crazy, this strange, eerie feeling was creeping up on me. It felt like there was something in the woods watching us. The trees felt almost alive, and there was just like a darkness. I don't know how else to explain it, that it was just evil. It felt evil and wrong, and I just did not want to be there anymore. I started praying harder and told my sister to drive as fast as she could away from that place, which, to be honest, with everything going on, wasn't that fast. For some reason, I just kept repeating that there's something bad here, something bad happened here, I don't like it, saying that over and over and over again. So, of course, my sister asks, what do I mean, and why do I keep saying that? Now, I'm not sure if I'm a medium, but I would consider myself a sensitive, and I can pick up on the energy of spirits and places. So, like a dumbass, I opened myself up to whatever the fuck this is.
Been there, done that.
Oh, we've got some good writers.
Yeah.
They can explain their situations well. I can hear my sister asking me what happened, and the word that came out of my mouth in an inhuman guttural growl was murder. That voice was not my voice.
Can you imagine, though, how terrifying that would be if you just like utter murder out of nowhere?
Oh, God, no. That voice was not my voice. That thing was not human. And as soon as that word left my mouth, I burst into tears. I was so scared. I clutched my Mary medallion and held my sister's hand. I made her pray the prayer of St. Michael with me. And when we were praying, it was almost like she couldn't get the words out. Like, I don't know, something was trying to stop her from praying.
Dude, I'm sorry. If you just started like saying murder next to me, I'm pushing you out the car. I'm not like, holding bye. Your hand.
Girl, bye. Oh, God. I haven't been that scared of something paranormal in a very long time, and I never, ever want to drive that stretch of road at night ever again.
I would not recommend they do that.
Right? Could we have been, there's still more. Could we have been hallucinating? Sure. But I don't know. This next part somehow creeps me out even
There's more?
It gets worser. So we're at the hotel now, and we're in our room, both talking about how crazy that all was. When my sister says, "You didn't see it, did you?" And of course I'm like, what? See what? She tells me, and I believe her because she was dead serious. And my sister can't tell a lie if her life depended on it because she just starts laughing. It's her tell. That's how I knew she at least believed what she saw. She told me that she saw a skeletal figure, like a human figure, in the woods, and it was all bone with like rotten flesh hanging off of it. And even though its body was human, she said that it had the head of a deer and like glowing red eyes.
That sounds like a Wendigo.
Yes, that explains like all the weather things too. She looked so scared, and I don't know how I couldn't have believed her. According to my sister, she saw this thing tailing the car the moment we noticed the trees moving, so about halfway or a third of the way down. Needless to say, I was pretty glad she told me that after we got to the hotel. Now, one last thing before I wrap this up. So my stepmom is from the Denver area and just so happened to have family in Dillon. I casually asked her if she's ever experienced anything weird on that road, and I didn't even have to tell her which one for her to know the road I was talking about. She said that when she was a kid, it used to freak the hell out of her. She can remember falling asleep in the car, and then whenever they got to that stretch of road, automatically waking up because she was too scared to sleep. And the thing about the car driving parallel to the road, Well, my stepmom said, and I haven't confirmed this, so take this with a grain of salt, but that the roads used to be built completely different back in the day. So that they would have run parallel to the mountain and not alongside
that car. It was like a ghost car running on the old road.
That's so right. She also told me a story about how when she was a teenager and how there was a time when she and her dad were driving on the road at night. She's in the passenger seat for context. She remembers looking up and seeing oncoming headlights in their lane, screaming, and then throwing her hands up out of reflex. Her dad swerves and almost crashes and then asks her what's wrong. My stepmom, confused, asks him if he just saw the car that was coming towards them just then, and he says no, of course. To be honest, that just confirmed it for me.
Wow.
Oh, and the whole thing about that weird voice. My sister said that when I spoke it in that tone, it was about 2 octaves deeper than my natural voice. Completely flat and absolutely not human. Murder. Murder. I can't do it. Murder. I sound like a frog. I'm trying to do it. Me and my sister both agree that whatever that entity was that she saw was absolutely trying to harm, if not kill us. We both think that it was screwing with her about the lane lines and trying to push us off the mountain. For what purpose, I still don't know, but I honestly don't want to think about it. We also agreed that all of this freaky shit we saw before was something trying to warn us. The primary reason? That hand was the first sign language that can mean stop. Oh, yeah, that's true. I think it's possible those other entities were trying to tell us to turn around. Too bad we didn't listen, lol. But anyway, that's my story of a possible encounter with a Wendigo and other things that go bump in the night. I never have and never will again drive the road between Leadville and Dillon at night or any other time. So I'm just curious, has anyone else had an experience like this there or an experience like this in general?
That's crazy. I mean, that all sounds like Wendigo.
I love how we're like, wow, that was a really scary story. And then they're like, oh, wait, there's more. Oh my gosh, that was a really intense story. Wait, it gets worse.
It gets worse. All right, so here's my last story. I just want to preface this by saying you all think you have crazy exes. Just wait. Okay, so this is saw a huge demon / shadow and heard it speak to me, and it's by XLTV 0406. Back in my freshman year of high school in New Jersey, when I was 15 years old, I had a very disturbing event happen to me, and I thought I'd share it with this community. Now, before getting into the details, I'd like to mention that my girlfriend at the time practiced Wicca and always read from old books. I really wasn't quite sure what it was, but I imagined it was some sort of witchcraft. I was kind of ignorant as to how powerful that stuff was and always just brushed it off. Anyway, I would always walk my girlfriend home after school and, like the gentleman that I am, carry her backpack. This is a vital fact that will come into play later on in the story.
Okay.
My girlfriend at the time was in Navy ROTC, and she was supposed to go to PT, which is physical training, one day after school. But instead, she skipped that PT, and we planned on going to my house to fool around. At the time, I was still a virgin, so I was eager to see if I would finally get lucky. Now, a few blocks away from our high school and on the way to my house, there's an old cemetery. For some reason, she wanted me to go into the cemetery with her, and being the naive 15-year-old that I was, I stupidly agreed. She makes a beeline to a very specific grave, as if she already knew who she was there to visit. The grave didn't even have a tombstone, just a nameplate in the ground, and it was very old, dating back to 1926, I believe. I still remember the name and hope that by typing her name, nothing creepy happens. Her name was Ada Mae Van Pelt.
Okay.
Anyway, she stops at this grave and asks me for her backpack. From her backpack, she pulls out a really old-looking book, a metal medieval-looking cup, so I guess like a goblet, and other old weird objects, and she just placed them on top of the grave. She sits on the ground and starts reading from this book. I'm not sure what language it was, but it sounded like Latin or something ancient that I couldn't understand. Anyway, while she's reading in this cryptic language, I start noticing changes in the atmosphere. It got really dark and windy, as if a storm was coming in right over us. And I kid you not, a whole bunch of crows showed up just out of nowhere and were hovering right over us.
Great sign.
Mm-hmm. At this point, I'm scared shitless, and all I could let out of my mouth was, "What are you doing?" To where she replied, "I'm evoking her powers. This was a very powerful witch, and I'm evoking her powers." So between all this creepy stuff happening around us and her telling us that she's basically stealing powers from the grave of a dead witch, I told her I didn't feel comfortable and that I would wait for her in front of the cemetery. I run as fast as I can to the cemetery gate and just stand there waiting for a few minutes, scared out of my mind. A few minutes later, she comes out of the cemetery and passes me her backpack and says, "Okay, let's go to your house."
Oh.
I don't ask her any more questions about what just happened because, frankly, I was too chicken shit to think about it any longer. We start walking to my place, go inside my apartment, and walk straight to my bedroom. Now, at the time, I lived in an apartment complex, and each building had 3 floors with stairs in the hallway connecting each other. I mean, that's typical, but he said that's important to what happens later.
Okay.
Anyway, being the young hornball that I was, I completely disregarded everything that just happened at the cemetery. And the only thing on my mind is getting to second base and possibly hitting a home run. I put her backpack down on the floor by my dresser and we start kissing on the bed. Ooh la la. We're kissing and feeling each other up for about a minute or so when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a huge black shadow shows up on my wall about 8 feet tall and really wide. But it had the form of a human or possibly an animal.
Okay.
We both look at each other and she asks me, "Can you hear it? He's trying to speak to you." But at the time I couldn't hear anything. I could only see it. So I tell her, "No, I cannot hear anything." She then places her hands on my ears, one hand on each ear, and says, "Now you can hear." All of a sudden I can actually hear what this thing was saying, but like not through my ears, if that makes any sense. It was more telepathic, if anything. Everything that it said was going straight into my mind, and I understood every word. I don't remember everything word for word, but basically what this dark being was telling us was that we were young and didn't know what love was or what we were getting ourselves into. Imagine like
you're trying to get laid.
Yeah, and a demon comes up and is like, y'all really aren't ready for this. I think y'all should take a step back, maybe breathe a little bit.
That's amazing. Like a big, what is that, a cock block?
Yeah, demonic cock block. Okay, so he continues to tell us that he used to live in that same apartment. And one day he came home early from work and caught his wife cheating on him with another man. He snapped and chased her to the door with a knife and ended up stabbing her multiple times. But she survived, and he later died in jail for that crime. At this point, my heart is beating at 1,000 beats per minute, and I'm very, very scared. But thank God my mom comes knocking on the door to check up on us, and the dark shadow poofs. All I can think of was to get out of that room. So we both go into my living room, and she confirms that she heard everything I heard word for word. I'm guessing his girlfriend, not his mother. Mm-hmm. We are both pretty shaken up, so we just stay in my living room watching TV until it's time for her to go home. We start getting ready for our walk, and for some reason, I can't find her backpack that I had left in my room earlier. We both look everywhere and can't seem to find it anywhere in the apartment. I end up telling her that I'll more than likely find it later, and I'll just bring it to school in the morning. Anyway, we walk out of my apartment, and right on the hallway stairs that go up to the 3rd floor is her backpack. Open on the top stair with all of its contents scattered all over the stairs. The book, the metal cup, all of it. Creeped out, I help her pack everything up and walk her home. I forgot to mention that at the time, my mother practiced Santeria. We're Cuban, and the majority of Cubans bring that religion with them. Thankfully, my mom left all that behind and is now a devout Christian woman. But anyway, when I get home, my mom and her friend are in the kitchen, and I overhear them talking about my girlfriend, and it seemed like they were trying to figure out stuff about her through the Santeria. I know nothing about this religion, so I'm just going to hope that he explains this.
Okay.
All of a sudden, my ex calls my house phone, and when I pick up, I hear her crying frantically. "Please, tell her to stop. It hurts. It hurts. Tell her to stop, please."
Oh.
This was so creepy. It was like she could feel my mom and her friend using the Santeria to reveal things about her, and it was physically hurting her.
Oh.
So we end up breaking up after this incident, and the years go by. We both graduate from high school, and we go many years without seeing each other. It seems like what they say is true, that when you practice witchcraft, it comes back to you, because I recently ran into her, and she's all messed up. She has some kind of disease where she's all swollen in the face and barely recognizable and has many other health issues. I feel bad for her. We had a long conversation. I brought up the incident above, and she remembers every single detail vividly, like I do, from the name on the grave to her backpack on the stairs with all her stuff thrown everywhere. I know some of you might not believe anything about this story, but trust me, everything I just revealed is completely accurate and really happened.
Wow. Okay.
I kind of want to look up Santeria. I've never heard of that before.
I just know the song. Ain't got no Santeria, but I got no crystal ball.
Oh, is that what they say?
Yeah.
I didn't know that was actually what they said.
Okay. Those were good stories.
They were good stories.
Yeah.
Oh man, this was fun.
This was fun.
I'm so glad we were able to do this, and we'll keep it up. We'll have every now and then we'll have a paranormal series on here. So yeah, and keep an eye out for Rachel's.
Whatever happens,
happens.
I'll let you know. But I do miss talking and broadcasting and
in the community.
it's just
so great.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for the ones that have stuck around and, you know, followed me to Strikes My Fancy. And I'm sure we'll follow Rachel and her endeavors. That really means a lot to us. And we appreciate you guys. We see y'all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right, guys. Remember, question everything. Never stop exploring. And as always, stay curious.